Hello everyone! Today we take a look at one of the most colorful and controversial families in Turkish history, the Shakir Pasha family. The heroes of a story full of both miracles and scandals, they lived their lives in the luxurious world of Istanbul and in the midst of political intrigue. Each member of this family is a story, a legend. Of course, there are many mysterious events and secrets among them. The Shakir Pasha family. Miracles and scandals. We will take a look at how these intrigues took shape in real life. Are you ready? Then here we go. Our story begins in the late Ottoman period. Born into a rich, well-established family, these people attract attention not only with their material wealth, but also with their intellectual accumulation, scandals, and extraordinary personalities. The life story of Shakir Pasha and his son, Halicarnas Balıkçısı, the Fisherman of Halicarnassus, is full of art, intrigue, and tragedy. This story sheds light on our understanding of both the intellectual atmosphere of the late Ottoman period and the cultural change in the early years of the Republic. Shakir Pasha, Ottoman diplomat, artist, and rebel. Shakir Pasha was one of the Ottoman intellectuals after the Tanzimat reorganization. He was not only a statesman, but also an artist and philosopher. However, he was an eventful character throughout his life. First, he served as the Ottoman ambassador in Paris, then as the Minister of Justice for a while. However, things did not go well here. He was dismissed and fell out of favor. What was really remarkable about him was his identity as an artist. Shakir Pasha was passionate about painting and art. So much so that art was indispensable for him despite his official duties in the Ottoman bureaucracy. But the tragedy in this talented man's life was hidden in his family relationships. Family scandals. A bad family dinner. Although Shakir Pasha's family was known as one of the most intellectual families of the Ottoman Empire, it was also full of scandal. Who are the other heroes of this tragic story? Shakir Pasha's daughter, Fahrelnissa Zeid, would become a world-class painter, while his son Javat Shakir would become a literary icon known as the Fisherman of Halicarnassus. Javat Shakir was born into a well-established and enlightened family of the Ottoman Empire. His father, Shakir Pasha, was an important diplomat, painter, and thinker of the period. However, Shakir Pasha was also known for his harsh temperament. He was known for his conflicts both within the family and with the people around him. Shakir Pasha's authoritarian behavior put great pressure on his family. He tried to exert intense control over his sons and daughters. Javat Shakir, on the other hand, was a free-spirited, bohemian, and artistic personality. This authoritarian approach of his father created a tension between Javat and his father that lasted for years. Javat Shakir, better known as the Fisherman of Halicarnassus, is one of the most important writers of Turkish literature, as well as a traveler, thinker, and artist. He is a figure who has left deep traces both with his works and his lifestyle, and is especially identified with Bodrum. Javat Shakir was born in Crete, where his father served as a commissar during the last period of the Ottoman Empire and the early years of the Republic, and was the child of an important family. His father, Mehmed Shakir Pasha, was a high-ranking soldier in the Ottoman Empire. Uncle was Ahmed Javat Pasha, Grand Vizier of the reign of Abdülhamid II, and his grandfather was Mustafa Asim Bey, Chief of the Military Council Department. He was named after his uncle, who had no children from his two marriages and loved him like his own child. His family was a Western-educated family interested in art, and Javat Shakir's educational life was shaped within this framework. Javat Shakir was the eldest son of a family of 6 children. All members of his family were talented in art. Among his siblings, Haliye, Ayşe, Suat, Fahrelnissa, and Aliye. Fahrelnissa became famous in painting and Aliye in engraving. Hakiye's daughter Fureya Koral became the first Turkish woman ceramicist. Fahrelnissa's children, Necad Mili Devrim, became a painter, and Shirin Devrim became a theater actress. Javat Shakir received his first education in Istanbul, first studying at Robert College and later graduating from Galatasaray High School. After graduating from Galatasaray High School, he continued his education in France. In France, he studied philosophy and literature at the University of Paris. His education here enriched his intellectual world and gave him an in-depth knowledge of Western culture. Javat Shakir's years in Paris broadened his worldview and introduced him to different cultures. He gained very important ideas, especially in the fields of art, literature, and philosophy. In the early 1920s, he was accepted to Oxford University and went to England to study history. Planning to continue his education in the Western world, Shakir gained significant intellectual knowledge during his years in both England and France. Now, let's talk about his decision to leave Oxford, which also appears in the series, and which caused his father to be angry with him. There are several factors behind Javat Shakir's departure from Oxford. 1. Family reasons. Javat Shakir's family, especially his father Mehmet Shakir Pasha and his mother, were members of a military family with traditional values and high rank. However, the family's economic situation weakened, and this affected Javat Shakir's educational life. 2. Love and the need for independence. At a young age, Javat Shakir was very fond of his freedom and preferred to adopt a free thinking and lifestyle rather than the Western education system. He decided to cut his ties with the academic world because he wanted to pursue his education more independently and chart his own path. What a ridiculous decision! He is leaving Oxford. 3 idealist thoughts. Javat Shakir was influenced by the Westernization movements of the period, but later decided to pursue a life of freedom and living in touch with nature. This period was shaped by his love of nature and his desire for a simple life. This philosophical shift led him to abandon his studies at Oxford. I wonder if he ever regretted it. In 1913, while studying painting in Italy, he met the Italian model Agnesia, and they got married immediately. After this marriage, he stayed in Italy for a while. Javat Shakir returned to his father with his wife in 1912. Shakir Pasha, who was struggling with economic difficulties, accepted his son and his pregnant wife into their home, even though they were in conflict with him. In 1914, when the family's financial difficulties increased, they moved to Shakir Pasha's farm in Afyon. He was arrested for murder after his father was shot and killed by a bullet from Javat Shakir's gun during an argument with him. According to a rumor, Javat Shakir, who was actually motivated by forbidden love, first aggravated the sleep of the household with the medicine he bought from the pharmacy that evening, and then neutralized the dog in front of his father's room and killed Shakir Pasha with a single bullet. I will give details about this in a moment. First of all, let's say this. Shakir Pasha had reacted very strongly to his son's marriage to a woman who was unbeknownst to them and who was never suitable for the family. He never saw the Italian bride as his daughter-in-law and was fed up with his son's rebellious behavior, his lack of a proper job, and the fact that he was causing more financial and moral damage to the family than contributing to it. There were also political differences. There was a huge gap between Shakir Pasha's official duties in the Ottoman administration and his traditional views, and Javat Shakir's more modern, liberal, and pro-Western ideas. This was a factor that made the father-son relationship difficult. Javat Shakir embraced the ideas of Westernization and reform, whereas his father was firmly rooted in the traditional structure of the Ottoman Empire. Literature and art. In this too, they were at very different points. When Javat Shakir became interested in writing and art, his father did not take his efforts in this field very seriously. His son's literary endeavors contradicted Shakir Pasha's expectations of a more serious career in line with the state. This made the father's relationship with his son somewhat difficult. Javat Shakir was arrested as the murderer of his father and sentenced to 15 years in the galleys. He was released after serving 7 years of this sentence. Now for the scandalous part. Hold on tight. Various allegations have been put forward over time as to why Javat Shakir committed this crime. Chief among them was the need for money. However, historian Murat Bardakçı put forward a much more sensational claim. An article written by Bardakçı on the Öteki Dünya page of Hürriyet newspaper in 2001 was perhaps the first step in making Javat Shakir's life the subject of a television series today. The article read as follows: a small contribution to the debate. Do pashas use force on their daughters-in-law? They did. And the murder of Shakir Pasha is a perfect example. Shakir Pasha was the father of Javat Shakir Kabagakli, known as the Fisherman of Halicarnassus. The reason why Balıkçısı spent many years in prison in his youth was not because of politics, as it is said, but because he shot his father. And the justification for the murder was the forbidden relationship of the Pasha father with his Italian bride, the wife of Balıkçısı. Javat Shakir's separation from his Italian wife after the death of his father shows that this forbidden relationship may in fact be true. After this great tragedy, the Italian wife Agnesia flees to Italy. Javat Shakir was released after making various efforts to benefit from the general amnesty announced by the government of Damat Ferit Pasha at that time. His mother had also made great efforts. Later, he was tried by the Independence Court for his article titled, "How Can Those Sentenced to Death in Political Prison Knowingly Go to be Hanged?" published in the April 13, 1925, issue of the magazine Resimli Hafta. He was found guilty of writing inciting the military to revolt when there was a rebellion in the country, and was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment in the castle and exiled to Bodrum. In this punishment, criminals were kept inside the castle walls and were not allowed to leave the fortress. He served his sentence in Bodrum, and at that time he fell in love with the natural beauty of Bodrum. This punishment would turn him into the Fisherman of Halicarnassus, the literary figure we all know. There is a good in every bad. Javat Shakir, on the other hand, returned to Bodrum in 1928 when he completed his sentence and lived here until 1947. The author, now the Fisherman of Halicarnassus, made great efforts to beautify Bodrum by bringing seeds and saplings from abroad. Javat Shakir worked in various jobs in Bodrum, including fishing. He married for the second time to Hamdiye, the daughter of his uncle, but he was never happy in this marriage. He was actually not a man of order. He was fond of his freedom. He could never come under pressure. Javat Shakir's third marriage was to Ismet Hanim, and he had 5 children from his 3 marriages. When his children reached the age of secondary education, he moved his family to Izmir because there was no secondary school in the town where he lived in Bodrum in those years. He continued his life as a writer and tourist guide, and also taught in guidance courses. Javat Shakir died on October 13th, 1973 at the age of 83 due to bone cancer, and was buried in Bodrum upon his will. As I said before, this is an incredibly intellectual family. Everyone was interested in art, understood politics, and knew many foreign languages. Their mother's contribution to the family being like this was very, very great. Let's take a look at Mrs. Ismet Sare, the perfect wife of Shakir Pasha. Life of Mrs. Sare, Ismet. Shakir Pasha's wife Sare Ismet Hanim is one of the important and tragic figures at the center of the family. However, Mrs. Sare Ismet's life was as challenging as that of her husband and children, especially coping with the authoritarian and harsh character of her husband, dealing with the troubles of her children, and coping with the tragedies within the family deeply affected her life. Mrs. Sare Ismet was one of the most respected and intellectual women of her time. She was an elegant and cultured figure who could be counted among the educated women of the Ottoman Empire. However, Shakir Pasha's harsh temperament and oppressive structure was one of the main factors that shook the balance in the family. Shakir Pasha was quite authoritarian towards his wife, as well as his children. This situation increased the psychological burden on Mrs. Sare Ismet. The biggest tragedy in the family occurred in 1914 when her son, Javat, shot his wife. Mrs. Sare lost her husband and sent her son to prison. Javat Shakir's relationship with his mother was also quite complicated. Against the authoritarian structure of his father Shakir Pasha, His mother was a more moderate and loving figure. However, the atmosphere of oppression within the family and tragic events caused the mother-son relationship to be strained. Javat Shakir shooting his father was an unbearable pain for Mrs. Sari Ismet. She had lost her husband, and it was her own son who did it. After this incident, Miss Sara Ismet's life was never the same again. She experienced great sadness and trauma. After losing her husband, she felt the weight of the years spent under his shadow even more. Although each of her children were successful in their own lives, the division of the family and the tragedies affected Miss Ismet's mental health. Mrs. Sar. Ismet led a quiet life after family tragedies. After losing her husband and the peace in her family, she preferred a more reclusive life. During these periods, she tried to maintain her connection with her artist children, such as her daughters Fahrelnissa, Zeid, and Aliye Berger. However, the losses she suffered created a deep loneliness and melancholy in her life. Her life is a powerful symbol representing the painful transition during the decline of the Ottoman Empire and the disintegration of a family. Unfortunately, Mrs. Sara Ismet's life, full of tragedies, is not remembered as much as the achievements of her children, who are remembered in Turkish literature and art. But she is a mother who brought important figures to the history of art. Let's go back to Javat Shakir. Javat Shakir Kabagakli was interested in literature from a young age. However, it was towards the end of the 1920s that he really became known in the literary world. The name of the fisherman of Halicarnassus was given to him during the years he lived in Bodrum, and so much so that he became identified with this name. The underlying meaning of this name is the fishermen in Bodrum and their life in touch with nature. Also, since Halicarnassus is the ancient name of Bodrum, it has a symbolic meaning reflecting the author's years spent here. Javat Shakir settled in Bodrum in the late 1920s and started to live here as a fisherman. During his years here, he wrote many works inspired by the natural beauties of Bodrum. These years were the most creative period of his life. The years he spent as a fisherman in Bodrum enabled him to embrace a simple life, and his literature offers deep observations on the relationship between nature and human beings. In addition to being a writer, he is also known as a traveler archaeologist and philosopher. In his literature, he especially deals with the relationship between nature and man, has written many important works. I highly recommend you to read them. In addition to his novels, the author has also written short stories, travelogues, and essays. Let's move on to his life and philosophical views. Javat Shakir Kabagakli's life contains deep thoughts on freedom, nature, and human nature. The author adopted an approach that criticizes the alienation brought about by modernization. In particular, he defended the positive effects of living in touch with nature on one's mental health and shaped his life accordingly. And here we took a short journey into the complex world of the Shakir Pasha family. The family's great scandals, political intrigues, and great mysteries are still talked about even today. This family, where miracles and scandals are intertwined, has left deep traces in Turkish history. A family drama for some, a magical fairy tale for others. I hope this video has helped you get a glimpse into this world full of secrets. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Take care and goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.